The wind carried no comfort, only the grit of dust and the faint, sickly sweet scent of slow decay. It scoured the high plains, a relentless, dry whisper that seemed to steal the very moisture from a man's throat and the hope from his soul. Out here, on the ragged edge of what little civilization dared to cling to, the land was a cruel mistress. It offered nothing freely, and what it gave it often took back with interest. For weeks now, the tales carried by the few lone riders who braved these desolate stretches had grown fouler, darker, murmurs of a ranch deep in a forgotten hollow of the Crimson Peaks, where the very earth was turning against itself. Those who spoke of these things did so with a distant, haunted look in their eyes, as if recalling nightmares they'd only heard whispered. They said the plains had a way of revealing the rot hidden beneath the surface, but sometimes the rot rose up and devoured the surface whole. They spoke of the man who rode into those tales, a shadow against the dying light, a figure etched into the parched landscape, as if born of its ancient stone and suffering. The man had no name that mattered, not anymore. He moved with the quiet deliberation of a predator that had seen too many hunts, too many horrors. His coat, dust-cloaked and heavy, seemed to absorb the light, and the brim of his hat cast his face in perpetual shadow. What could be glimpsed was a terrain of old scars, like a map of battles fought and barely won. His eyes, when they met the world, were the color of storm clouds, holding ancient weariness and an unflinching resolve. He was a man who carried a grim purpose, and those who saw him knew, instinctively, that he was drawn to places where the world had started to unravel. He found the ranch, or what was left of it, nestled in a bowl of land where the peaks rose like the jagged teeth of some forgotten beast. It wasn't just desolate, it was dying. The fences were broken, the barbed wire sagging like rusted veins. The sparse scrub brush that usually clung tenaciously to life was brittle, its leaves curled and brown, crumbling to ash at a touch. The ground itself was parched to a bone-white dust, cracked like old pottery. There was a silence about the place that wasn't natural, a heavy absence of sound, as if even the wind held its breath. No buzzards wheeled in the vast empty sky, an ill omen in itself, for where there was death, they usually gathered. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Not the stench of decomposition, not exactly. It was more subtle, pervasive. A dry, metallic tang mingled with something vaguely sweet, like overripe fruit, left to wither in the sun. It clung to the air, to the dust, to the very timbers of the dilapidated ranch house. He dismounted, the soft thud of his boots on the desiccated earth sounding unnaturally loud in the oppressive stillness. His horse, a gaunt, dark beast with eyes that had seen too much, snorted, shifting uneasily. Even animals felt the wrongness in the air. He moved towards the corrals first, his hand resting instinctively on the worn grip of the pistol at his hip. Though he knew deep down this wasn't a threat a bullet could stop. What he saw there confirmed the grim rumors. A dozen cattle, their hides loose and hanging like tattered blankets over skeletal frames. Their eyes were sunken, filmed with a milky haze, and their mouths hung slightly agape, as if perpetually gasping for a last, elusive breath. Their coats were dull, patchy, the color leached from them. One calf lay on its side, barely breathing, its ribs stark against its parchment-thin skin. It wasn't starvation. It was something else, a draining, as if the very essence of their life was being siphoned away, leaving only the husk. He saw no signs of disease in the typical sense, no festering sores, no visible infection, just this profound, accelerating decay. The ground around their watering trough was equally desolate, the earth baked hard, devoid of even the toughest weeds. A single, dark, viscous puddle remained in the trough's bottom, stagnant and clotted, with a faint, iridescent sheen on its surface. He knelt, not touching, but observing the subtle, disturbing patterns in the scum. It was almost crystalline, unnatural. He moved to the ranch house, a squat, timber structure that looked as if it had been leaning against the wind for decades, barely holding on. The windows were dark, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking a mournful, drawn-out sigh in the non-existent breeze. The silence inside was even heavier than outside, pressing in on him, cold despite the baking sun. He stepped over the threshold, his senses alert, his hand still on his pistol. The interior was dim, dusty. The air was thick, with the same cloying, sickly sweet scent, now stronger, mixed with the faint, undeniable odor of human despair. Furniture stood where it had been left, covered in a fine, powdery dust. A half-eaten meal sat on a wooden table, the food shriveled to unrecognizable lumps, the plates rimmed with a curious, pale residue. A child's toy, a carved wooden horse, lay forgotten on the floor, its once bright paint flaked and dull. He found the family in the master bedroom, a man and a woman, side by side in their bed, beneath a thin, faded quilt. They lay perfectly still, their forms barely mounded under the covers. He approached slowly, his bootfalls echoing softly. He pulled back a corner of the quilt. Their faces were drawn, their skin taut and papery, stretched drum-tight over their bone structure. Their eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, pupils dilated, but holding no light, no recognition. Their lips were cracked, pulled back in a silent final gasp. Their hair, usually thick and dark, was thin, wispy, like bleached cobwebs. There was a faint, almost invisible residue on their skin, a fine, glittering dust clinging to the wrinkles and hollows of their desiccated faces. Their hands, clasped loosely on their chests, were gnarled and skeletal, the nails yellowed and brittle. It was the same as the livestock, but magnified. Their lives had not simply ended. They had been stolen, drained. Left behind were the hollow shells, the discarded husks of what had once been living, breathing people. The thought sent a cold, creeping dread through him, a familiar chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This wasn't death. It was an echo of consumption, a profound and horrifying diminishment. He found the child in the adjacent room, a small girl clutching a rag doll, curled in a fetal position in her bed. Her face, too, was a withered mask, her small body terrifyingly light under the quilt. Her doll, once colorful, was now gray and brittle. The sight stirred something cold and hard within him, a flinty resolve. This wasn't just a job, it was an abomination. He was a man burdened by such sights, yet hardened by them too. He carried the weight of the lost, but never allowed it to break him. He simply noted the details, the manner of the draining, the specific decay, and the underlying wrongness of it all. He spent the next few hours meticulously examining the property. He traced the dry, cracked earth, observed the dead vegetation. He noted the way the blight seemed to deepen, to become more pronounced, the closer he got to the back of the ranch house, where a small overgrown path led away from the dilapidated structures. The air there was colder, denser, the sickly sweet smell more potent, with a faint underlying hint of ozone and something rotten, like disturbed soil after a long burial. The path led through a patch of skeletal, twisted trees, their branches bare and gnarled, reaching like arthritic fingers towards a perpetually gray sky. Even the birds avoided this patch of desolation. The earth here was black, damp, but not with water. It felt clammy, strangely yielding beneath his boots, even though the surrounding land was bone dry. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground, a subtle thrumming like a distant heartbeat. And then he saw it. Nestled in a hollow, half hidden by the skeletal trees and a mound of dark, strangely smooth rocks, stood an ancient well. It was not like the typical frontier wells, dug haphazardly and reinforced with rough-hewn timber. This was a structure of immense age, built from dark, obsidian-like stones fitted together with chilling precision, as if by hands that understood forces beyond human comprehension. No mortar held them. They simply interlocked, forming a perfect, dark cylinder that plunged into the earth. The wellhead was adorned with carvings, deeply etched and almost entirely eroded by time and weather. But even in their decay, they hinted at grotesque, swirling patterns, lines that seemed to writhe and flow, depicting things that were not natural. Tentacles, or roots, or perhaps both. A heavy, wrought iron cover, thick with rust and adorned with more of the unsettling carvings, lay askew beside the well, half buried in the strange, dark earth. It looked as if it had been forced open from within, or perhaps violently torn aside by something powerful. From the well itself, a faint, translucent mist rose, swirling sluggishly, like smoke from a dying fire. It was not water vapor. It had a curious, almost oily viscosity, and it carried the scent. The same sickly sweet metallic tang, but here it was overpowering, cloying, filling his lungs with a raw, irritating sensation. He could feel it on his skin, a subtle cold prickling. This was the source. He knew it with the certainty of a man who had faced such things before. This was not a natural spring. It was a wound in the earth, and something ancient and hungry was bleeding out of it. He knelt by the well, drawing a small, leather-bound pouch from inside his coat. From it, he carefully extracted a piece of finely spun silver wire and a small, smooth stone, dark as night, veined with faint, glowing lines that pulsed with a dim, internal light. He held them over the mist, the silver wire instantly dulled, tarnishing to a deep, sickly gray. The stone's internal light flickered, then dimmed, as if struggling against an oppressive force. His methods were less magic, more understanding. An intuitive grasp of the unnatural, a knowledge of ancient truths that had long been forgotten by man. He read the signs not just with his eyes, but with a deeper sense, a resonance with the twisted energies of the world. The mist thickened, and he heard it then, a low, guttural murmur, like 1,000 thirsty mouths whispering just beyond the veil of hearing. It was the sound of profound hunger and ancient, ceaseless craving. It seemed to emanate from the depths of the well, pulling at the air, at the very light. He stood, his gaze fixed on the dark maw of the well. This was no simple parasitic creature. It was something vast, something foundational. A cancer in the earth itself, slowly leaching the vitality from everything connected to it. The entire ranch, the land, the unfortunate souls who had tried to scratch a living from it, they were all just sustenance for this slow, inexorable draining. The sun was beginning to dip below the jagged peaks, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and blood orange. It was a cruel beauty, highlighting the desolation. He knew he could not leave this thing to fester. It would spread, slowly but surely, leaching the life from the plains, turning the vibrant world into a desiccated wasteland. He began his preparations. From his saddlebag he retrieved a small, heavy axe, its blade polished to a mirror sheen, etched with intricate, barely visible sigils. He sharpened it further with a whetstone, the rasping sound a stark counterpoint to the unnatural silence. He then unwrapped a length of sturdy, oil-soaked rope and a handful of small, iron bells, each one hammered with a different, peculiar symbol. These were not for charming, but for disrupting, for breaking the hold. He found a nearby dead tree, one of the skeletal sentinels, its wood brittle and dry. With the axe, he carefully chopped a series of thick, straight stakes, stripping them of their bark. Each strike against the dead wood echoed with a hollow, dead sound. He then took a branding iron, not for cattle, but one he carried for a different purpose. Its head was a complex symbol, a twisted knot of lines and circles that seemed to shift slightly in the dimming light. He lit a small fire, the flames struggling against the pervasive chill of the well, and heated the iron until it glowed an angry, spitting orange. One by one, he pressed the heated iron into the end of each stake, searing the symbol deep into the wood. The smell of burning wood mingled with the sickly sweet odor, creating a potent, disturbing perfume. As the last symbol was seared, he began to plant the stakes in a precise circle around the well. Using a heavy hammer to drive them deep into the dark, yielding earth, each thud resonated with a low, thrumming response from the well itself, as if the ground beneath him was grumbling in irritation. As the sun sank completely, the shadows lengthened, stretching like grasping fingers from the base of the peaks. The mist from the well began to glow with a faint, sickly green luminescence, pulsing in time with the barely perceptible thrumming from beneath the earth. The air grew colder, and the whispers from the well intensified, a chilling chorus of unseen voices, coaxing, cajoling, promising oblivion. He tied the iron bells to the rope, spacing them evenly, and then, with a deep breath, he lowered the rope into the well. The bells tinkled faintly as they descended into the glowing green mist, their small, sharp sounds devoured by the hungry silence within. He could feel a distinct pull on the rope, as if something unseen below was tugging at it, testing its strength. He secured the rope to one of the rooted stakes, then turned his attention to the wellhead itself. The dark, polished stone seemed to throb with the same sickly green light. He produced a small vial of viscous, shimmering liquid, not water, but something thick and oily, faintly phosphorescent. He poured it slowly, carefully, over the ancient carvings on the wellhead. As the liquid touched the stone, the carvings seemed to deepen, to glow brighter with a malevolent green light, twisting and writhing as if alive. The sickly sweet smell intensified, becoming almost unbearable, burning at his nostrils, stinging his eyes. He then spoke, his voice low and guttural, a series of ancient, unfamiliar words that seemed to scrape against the very fabric of the air. It wasn't a chant, but a declaration, a binding. The words were old, older than the peaks themselves, resonant with a forgotten power. As he spoke, the green mist coiled higher, thick and angry, swirling around him, trying to touch him, to envelop him. He felt the pull, the subtle tugging at his life force, the pervasive cold that sought to seep into his very bones, to drain the warmth from his blood, the thoughts from his mind. It was an insidious assault, not a blunt force, but a slow, suffocating draw. He stumbled back, gasping, the words still on his tongue, but the drain was powerful. He felt his limbs grow heavy, his thoughts sluggish. It was as if 1,000 tiny mouths were pressing against his skin, sucking, endlessly. His vision blurred at the edges, and the world seemed to dim, to fade to a dull gray. He gripped the stake he had driven into the earth, the seared symbol burning hot against his palm. The ancient power in the well reacted to his resistance, its whispers turning to a low, furious hiss, a sound like dry leaves scuttling across a tombstone. He fought it, not with strength, but with will. He had faced things that clawed at the mind, at the soul, at the very spark of life. He had learned to resist the seduction of oblivion, the creeping cold of despair. He forced his mind to focus, to push back against the draining tide. He drew upon a wellspring of grim resolve that had been forged in countless grim encounters. The air around him crackled with unseen energy. The small iron bells within the well began to ring, not with a pleasant chime, but with a dissonant, grating clang as if struggling against a viscous resistance. The sounds, sharp and piercing, seemed to tear at the fabric of the mist, creating tiny ripples in its glowing green surface. With a final strained effort, he plunged his hand into the shimmering liquid he had poured over the wellhead. The moment his skin touched it, a searing pain shot through him, as if he had grasped a live wire. The well roared, a sound that seemed to tear through the air, shaking the very earth beneath his feet. The green mist recoiled, swirling violently, then condensed into a dark, pulsing core within the well, like a malevolent eye opening in the depths. He snatched his hand back, his fingers seared, but the contact had been made. The words he had spoken, the symbols he had seared, the ritual liquid. They had found their mark. The well continued to thrum, but the sickly green glow began to dim, flickering erratically. The whispers faded, replaced by a low, mournful moan that seemed to echo from the very heart of the earth. He watched, breathless, as the mist slowly, agonizingly, retreated into the dark maw of the well. The obsidian stones of the wellhead seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, as if something vast and terrible was struggling within its confines. Slowly, the dark, viscous puddle at the cattle trough dried completely, leaving only a faint, crystalline residue. The skeletal trees around the well seemed to sag, their branches drooping, as if the last of their borrowed energy had been ripped away. The struggle had been silent, unseen, but the mark it left on him was profound. His skin was clammy, his head pounded with an insistent throb. His muscles ached as if he had spent days in battle. But more than that, there was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, a coldness that seeped into his soul. He had not merely fought a creature, he had fought against the very fabric of decay, the slow, insidious unraveling of life itself. After such encounters, he would carry the mark of what he had faced, a new line of weariness etched around his eyes, a deeper silence in his movements. He never spoke of the specific horrors, not truly. He merely moved on, carrying the grim knowledge within him. He retrieved the axe and the hammer, gathering his tools with the slow, deliberate movements of a man utterly spent. He left the stakes planted around the well, their seared symbols now glowing with a faint, protective pulse, a ward against the ancient hunger contained within. The bells remained in the well, their occasional faint clink echoing in the oppressive silence, a constant reminder of the fight. The sun had risen, painting the eastern sky in pale, hopeful colors, but the ranch remained a place of profound desolation. The air no longer carried the cloying, sickly sweet scent, but it was replaced by a sterile, empty smell, the odor of absence. The land was still parched, the buildings still derelict, and the quiet despair of the dead hung heavy in the air. The well was sealed, for now its ancient hunger contained, but the land had been deeply scarred. Its very essence had been poisoned, and it would be generations, if ever, before it truly healed. The desiccation remained, a permanent monument to the blight that had passed through. He mounted his horse, the beast shifting nervously beneath him, its eyes still wary of the lingering wrongness in the air. He did not look back. There was nothing left for him there but the echoes of a silent scream and the slow, inevitable return of dust to dust. As he rode away, the parched earth stretched endlessly before him. The morning light cast his shadow long and dark, stretching out behind him like a persistent, silent companion. And in the subtle shift of the wind, in the almost imperceptible tremor of the ground, there was the faintest whisper, an echo of the ancient hunger he had faced, a reminder that some battles were never truly won, only momentarily postponed. The writer carried the weight of it all, another grim tale etched into the landscape of his soul, another scar among the many. If this story left you with a lingering chill, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale from the writer's trail. And tell me, if you found that well choked with mist and whispering hunger, would you ride on, or would you try to seal it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching Cabin of Whispers. See you next time.